You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 6th of March, 2026 on Monocle Radio.
A week of war with Iran, to what effect and with what justification? Is the American rapprochement with Venezuela the intended model? And dispatches from two design capitals. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Tara Kangalu, Chris Sabatini, Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Grace Charlton will discuss the day's big stories, and we'll have our weekly wrap-up of what we've learned. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. You're listening to the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller. We start in Iran. In the week since the United States and Israel began striking targets in Iran, America's justifications and victory conditions have warped and fluctuated to an extent that could very well lead the skeptical observer to suspect that nobody is entirely sure what they're doing. In the last couple of hours, US President Donald Trump has demanded Iran's, quote, unconditional surrender, though it is not clear whom he expects to surrender what. Well, I'm joined first of all by Tara Kangalu, global affairs journalist and author of The Heartbeat of Iran. Tara, first of all to Iran. Obviously, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed earlier this week. Do we understand who is directing events now?
Andrew, it's a pleasure to be with you. And no, we cannot have a clear understanding as to who is directing the show right now. But a few things I can tell you that we have some clarity on, and that is that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, they pretty much control the entire system. They are the most powerful apparatus in Iran. They have their hands in intelligence, the political sphere, and also military, right? So they are leading the show as we speak. But who would that next leader be? That's up in the air. I'm hearing from sources that in the next coming day, we will see the new leader of Iran emerge. There are still some candidates that we're talking about, and I know you and I are going to discuss, but a whole lot of ambiguity as to the current state of affairs inside Iran, but also, as you said, from the outside. We have no idea what President Trump has in mind. And I will add one more thing, that today, on Friday, President Trump also said that he was open to having a religious leader, Andrew. He said, it depends on who that person is, and, quote, I don't mind religious leaders. I deal with a lot of religious leaders and they are fantastic, end quote. So a lot at stake and a lot that is unclear.
I mean, we have seen Iran, of course, lashing out across the region at nearly a dozen countries so far. Does that look to you like part of a previously agreed plan, i.e., here is what we do if they do come for us, if the regime is decapitated, which must have been a prospect they discussed?
I'm not sure if I can say it was a coordinated attack, but I will say one of the thinkings was perhaps in Iran that if we attack the Gulf countries, they might pressure the US and Israel to back off. But honestly, what we're seeing now is things are escalating. I know Qatar and Oman have long played mediator roles, and they might be doing the same now. Now, my question is, how can they do that while they're being attacked? So a lot that is, again, unclear when it comes to Iran's relation with the Gulf, and also Gulf's relation when it comes to the United States and controlling what Trump does next.
I mean, it is interesting that you say that, because Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has said today that some countries have begun mediation efforts, which of course could mean anything at all. But at this point, does the Iranian regime, if we assume perhaps that President Pezeshkian does have some say in the decisions it's making, does it have any leverage it could bring to the table? Is there anything it could actually offer the US and Israel that might persuade them to call this off?
A few things we should look at. Iran, in some ways, of course, after the Israeli and US attacks, have set the region on fire, right? So the entire place is ablaze. Let's not forget what's happening in Lebanon, by the way. On top of that, you have Iraq, Turkey, who want nothing of this. They don't want to be part of this, and they're also being dragged in. I know you saw, I'm sure, the drone strikes to Azerbaijan that Iran is denying. So thinking might be that, you know what? We're drowning. Let's drag everyone else down with us. And that's something that, again, in Iran, sources have been telling me. But the idea of countries that are being under attack playing negotiator role, that's something up for debate. Also, Mr. Pezeshkian that you mentioned, I'm not sure how much power he has right now. Again, the IRGC, that is an incredibly complex, multifaceted apparatus, is controlling Iran right now. There are multiple figures that have ties to this apparatus that, by the way, play on different teams. Many of them, for them right now, it's a survival game. They want to stay in power. And so internally, there are a lot going on in Iran. So there's no one cohesive decision maker or person in charge. On top of that, Iran has been planning for this for many years. And as we've heard from the foreign minister, the IRGC is decentralized. They've done mosaic planning, and that's how they are functioning right now in their retaliatory attacks against the United States and Israel, and of course, the Gulf region.
Well, just finally then, and on that question of who might end up taking charge in Iran, we have also heard President Trump saying, although with all due recognition that it may just have been his whim of the day, that he wanted to be involved in the selection of the next supreme leader, hopefully not in weekly installments broadcast on network television, but you never can tell. But would, in any imaginable circumstances, however unsympathetic they may be to the Islamic Republic, ordinary Iranians accept a supreme leader who was obviously a creature of the United States?
When you speak with ordinary Iranians, Andrew, they want to move beyond the Islamic regime. The word that they often use is that we've been stuck between the lunacy of a repressive regime and also foreign powers that we can't decide. And I think, again, when you talk to people on the ground right now who have zero idea on what's next, they're just waiting. They tell you, we're waiting. But one thing they know is that if the regime stands as is, they're going to be more repressive than before. But they have absolutely zero clarity on what's next. And the last point I will add to that is we saw what happened, for instance, in Syria. And I think that's an interesting example. Right now, the person who's leading Syria is a former Al-Qaeda who had a $10 million bounty over his head. He is in some ways repackaged and is dealing with the West. Is that what President Trump has in mind for Iran? Is he going to repackage a cleric and sell it to the world? Who knows? But the Iranian people, I think, are very well aware that foreign powers don't have their best interest at heart, all the while that they've been choked and repressed by the powers to be at home.
Tara Kangalu, global affairs journalist, author of The Heartbeat of Iran. Thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. This is the Monocle Daily with me, Andrew Muller, and by way of illustrating where Donald Trump might have thought/hoped we would be with Iran by now, to Venezuela, which just a couple of months after American forces stormed its capital and seized its president, has agreed to resume diplomatic relations with the United States. It does not seem to have agreed entirely on the way forward, while the US statement talks brightly about a peaceful transition to a democratically elected government. The Venezuelan contribution to this heartwarming scenario prefers to focus on a new stage of dialogue based on mutual respect. Well, I'm joined with more by Dr. Christopher Sabatini, Senior Fellow for Latin America at Chatham House. Chris, first of all, are you surprised to see this? Has Venezuela decided to let bygones be bygones rather quickly?
I don't think they have much of a choice right now. They saw the overwhelming power of the United States, as Trump bragged about, not unexpectedly, to remove the then president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. And there's even rumors now that the Justice Department is compiling a dossier on a potential indictment against the now interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, for money laundering. So they're basically leveraging everything they can to make sure this is a very compliant government. Now, Delcy's in a difficult position because she has a number of elements around her who are not as pro-US, or at least as pragmatic, or as willing to change colors as she is. But I'm not surprised. Basically, the Trump administration wanted to engage in a smash and grab operation that shocked and awed the world. In fact, one could argue that's sort of the model that he's taking now to Iran, although it doesn't fit. I'm not even sure it fits in Venezuela. But right now, he wants to keep Venezuela off his plate. He's happy to engage. And quite frankly, Delcy Rodriguez, the former vice president, now interim president, she's always been a friendly face to international investors. She has a history. She and her brother, who's president of the National Assembly, their father was killed after having basically kidnapped a American businessman and was killed, they believe, by the CIA. So she's put all of that family history behind her now to basically embrace the inevitable, that basically Donald Trump is her benefactor.
I mean, do you perceive a degree of mutual willingness to ignore or look past those scenarios that their statements have set out, i.e. the United States talking about a peaceful transition to democracy and the incumbent regime in Venezuela? I think you could say focusing its priorities elsewhere.
You're absolutely right. They're trying to focus on that sort of Venn diagram of shared interest right now. Quite frankly, I think Delcy Rodriguez has more leverage over Donald Trump than many people believe. He does not want to see turmoil, chaos in Venezuela. He's bragged about his relationship with her. He even referred to her, oddly enough, as the president-elect of Venezuela. She's never been elected to any office, actually. So what we're looking at right now is a situation where they're trying to cooperate. They're trying to move this slowly along. But what this means is democracy and the Democratic opposition has been sidelined for the moment. And every time they try to raise the issue of elections, the White House privately, not always privately, but mostly privately, expresses their frustration. Let us do this at our own pace. This is not about the Democratic opposition. It's about our relationship with Venezuela. It's about trying to get Venezuela back into the international system. And there are very dramatic steps that are being taken, including the diplomatic recognition of Venezuela, as we just saw, the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela. And now there's even talk of basically trying to find a pathway for Venezuela back into the multilateral lending system so that they can restore themselves in capital markets. So things are moving. It's not the way the Democratic opposition in Venezuela wanted. But right now, it's Donald Trump's world. And basically, the Democratic opposition is living in it.
Well, if there is not going to be democratic elections in Venezuela anytime soon, what are the practical upshots in the near future of this mutual re-recognition? Secretary of Interior Doug Burgum, who has been spearheading this, also leads what is grandly known as Donald Trump's National Energy Dominance Council.
Yeah, well, first of all, Donald Trump made, I think personally, a diplomatic error in making this all about oil. It isn't all about oil. There are plenty of good reasons to maybe not in the way he did, but to celebrate the removal of Nicolas Maduro. But yes, democracy is not on the agenda right now. It's about basically trying to stand up the economy. The Venezuelan oil production had slipped from about 3 million barrels a day production to about less than 1 million before the smash and grab. So in that case, basically, he really wants to restore some level of economic control over the country. And what's curious is a lot of these ships and the oil that have been seized by the U.S., those receipts go to a Qatari bank that then the U.S. redistributes and audits the Venezuelan government how those can be spent. So we're looking at kind of a very, if you will, 19th century protectorate type system that is in favor of the U.S. and certainly not in favor over the long term of Venezuela's autonomy and its sort of own sort of sovereignty. But it's working for Donald Trump, and right now it's working for Delcy Rodriguez, and that honestly is okay with many Venezuelans. If you look at public opinion surveys, Venezuelans are feeling much more optimistic. The economy control had contracted by 3/4. Inflation was about to reach a tipping point of over 100,000%. Over 100%. It was, on the brink of utter collapse. It had already collapsed. So now there is some lifeline, but democracy is not now, in the immediate future.
Well, just finally then, Chris, and on that thought, because it is the thing that I suppose should be the thing that matters, is what are the chances, again, in the near future of any of this improving matters for ordinary Venezuelans? Because as has been frequently pointed out, not least by exasperated ordinary Venezuelans, they should be one of the richest, most comfortable and secure countries on earth.
So the first thing is there have been improvements. There have been a series of releases of political prisoners. About 400 or so have been released. There are many more that are still, unfortunately, rotting away in Venezuela's inhumane jails. But there have been releases. There are actually, protests that occur. The families of political prisoners are camping out outside the prisons. That's now allowed. That would have been quickly repressed, brutally repressed by the Maduro government. There are also advances in terms of injecting liquidity. There is about $100 million worth of oil that the Venezuelan government had been basically shipping out, that now that money has been returned to Venezuela. It's injected some liquidity. It's calmed down fears of hyperinflation. There have been advances, but they're simply not sufficient. And even the much lauded hydrocarbons law that the National Assembly approved has many holes in it, giving vast discretion by the president or the minister of oil, which is the same person, Delcy Rodriguez, to determine contracts. And of course, we saw with Secretary Burgum of Energy and the Interior that basically now there are going to be all these deals cut on gold and mining and so on. It's going to be difficult to see these things trickle down over the long term to your average Venezuelan. But for now, the suffering has been so long, this is a welcome respite.
Chris Sabatini at Chatham House, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. The Madrid Design Festival, concluding this weekend, is a vast, sprawling thing which consumes the city for a month. One part of it this year was the Forma Design Fair. That's F-O-R-M-A, as in that's the name of it. It's not a thing that was happening, although technically that does also apply. Dedicated anyway to collectible design. Among those attending was Monocle's Associate Editor for Culture, Sophie Monaghan-Coombs, who joins me in the studio now. I got a bit sidetracked there by the double meaning, Sophie, of the word Forma. But what actually was it all about?
So, as you mentioned, Forma is Madrid's first design fair. So it's quite a big deal for the design industry in the city and, for all of Spain. So the design festival has been going for quite a few years. It's this month-long event. There's lots of things happening all over the city, but it's more experiential. The design fair, Forma, is really about buying things. And the director described it as he wanted to make Spain's most beautiful design shop and have all of these things that you could buy and, a way of being introduced to new Spanish designers. There were lots of very young designers and it had that real Iberian flavour, There were some galleries from Mexico, some from Colombia, but mostly they were all from Spain, which was really lovely to see.
I mean, when you talk about it being things for sale, design festivals, especially fairly upscale ones, are not usually known for being bargain basement style events. But did this cater to what we'll call a variety of price ranges?
Well, not it depends where the ranges, start and finish. But it's a very young, design market, this collectible design market in Spain. So you're not going to see the sort of prices that you might at, Pad London or Design Miami, Paris. But this is, these designers are really at the top of their game. They've honed their craft. It's really beautiful things. So, it depends how you think about value, I guess.
Arco Madrid, we should also talk about Spanish International Art Fair.
Yes, so Arco is Spain's big art market fair for the art market. It's very international, and the thing that makes Arco so important is because it creates this bridge between Latin America and Spain, but also the rest of Europe. And, I had a really interesting conversation with the guy that had curated the Latin American, specific Latin American section of the fair. And he said, look, collectors in Spain, collectors in Europe, they're not going to go to Brazil, to Peru and Colombia looking for new artists, finding out about the kind of cool new galleries. And so this is how we bring them to them. And so, it was really busy, it was very buzzy, and it felt like a very positive event.
And did it feel like, and I'm asking you this question because I suspect the answer is going to be yes, that like Madrid is just one of those cities which is preternaturally good at doing this kind of thing?
I think Madrid is preternaturally good at a lot of things. I love the city. I think it's just so vibrant. People are out and about all the time. There's a lot of real positive energy. And when you have, Arco Madrid, you have Forma, you have the international, you have the design festival. You also, have smaller contemporary art fairs, which are kind of cooler, a little bit more niche. There's so much happening. And we also, I went and visited a few new design spaces, and they were really interesting. A lot of them used sustainable materials. They'd kind of transformed old buildings, old spaces, using a lot of the materials that had been there before. So it feels like there's, a lot going on, and it's a real sort of exciting moment for the design and the art scene in Madrid.
This is also a time of year as well in which weather-wise it is a pleasant moment to visit Madrid-ish. I mean, I ask because the only time I've ever been to Madrid, stupidly, was off the back of a NATO summit a couple of years ago, which they insist on holding in the middle of summer, and that's not really an optimum time of year for idly sauntering around Madrid trying to get used to it, unless you wear a hat and eat a great deal of ice cream.
Yes, both of which are sort of, quite enjoyable.
Well, indeed, things. That is true. But I do want to ask about one of Madrid's obvious evergreens, which is the Prado. And I did manage to get into that on a day where the queues were not too obnoxious. I don't know how I was that lucky. And it is astonishing, but there's one exhibition in particular you'd like to recommend.
Yes, this is the final weekend for this exhibition, and I'd really recommend it if anyone is in the city this weekend. The Prado is my favourite museum, I think, in the world. I really love it there, and this is a really fantastic exhibition of Juan Munoz, who was a Spanish sculptor, and he created these kind of interesting figures, and they're staged in these sort of rooms that you step into that have geometric print floors, and you kind of become part of the scenes as you walk around the figures that he created. And then another thing that I really like is that they've put some of his works, some of those figures kind of spread throughout the museum. So you might be looking at some of the Goyas, or you might be, in the El Greco section, and you might see a couple of them. So it's quite fun to sort of walk around and spot them. And one of the things that, I love about the Prado, which I'm sure you will appreciate, is that they really do not like people using their phones.
They do not.
So as soon as you take them out, as soon as you start taking a photo of something, someone will come over and tap you on the shoulder. And compared to the design fair, compared to Arco Madrid, I really appreciated how, everyone was going around, and even if it wasn't by choice, they had to just look with their eyes rather than through a screen.
Sophie Monaghan-Coombs, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. It may well seem and may well be that it is always Fashion Week somewhere, but even if that is the case, Paris Fashion Week is always going to matter more than most. And joining me now from Paris, and indeed Paris Fashion Week, is Monocle's Associate Editor for Design and Fashion, Grace Charlton. Grace, welcome to The Daily.
Thank you, Andrew. Another week, another fashion week, as you said.
I know. Do you have to do that thing that bands on tour do of like writing down the name of the city they're in above the exit to the dressing room so they don't walk on stage and say, hello, Baltimore, when they're in Chicago?
That's so clever. I might start doing that. Yeah, I'm getting my French and Italian confused sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's obviously probably a worse mistake to make in Paris than in Milan. But how has it been so far? What have you seen that has excited you?
I think it's been a really strong season. I went to Dior, which was super, super strong the other day. It was Jonathan Anderson. He's a Northern Irish designer. It was his second women's wear collection. And I have to confess, The first one he did was just not for me, but the one I went to the other day was absolutely stunning. Today I've got two Japanese shows. I went to Issei Miyake a little bit earlier, and there's Yoji Yamamoto almost directly after this, after I hang up. And I think that's the real strength of Paris is how international it is. You know, they've got these big Japanese brands showing alongside, you know, a Spanish house like Loewe and all the French houses, obviously.
For all that it is a vast and international event, whether by accident or design, does any sort of unifying theme or trend appear to be descending?
Well, yes and no. No, in the way that I can't actually pinpoint what the one trend is this season, but what I've noticed is that everyone is really leaning into their tribes and their niches, if that makes sense. Like at Chloe, which is being led by Chimena Kamali since 2023, they had these models with like really hippie-ish hair and like prairie dresses and very Janis Joplin, you know, round reflective sunglasses. And then you go to a show like Rick Owens, and that's a completely different thing. Like everyone's wearing all black leather and these huge platforms. So everyone's doing something very different, but they're all doing it to maybe more of an extreme in a way to differentiate themselves.
I mean, is that possibly a reflection in any sense of the struggles the luxury market has had these last few years, that houses are starting to think, well, we know who our audience is and we know what they like?
Yeah, definitely. And you get the sense that they're catering to the very important clients, the VICs. For reference, this is only about 2% of the clients of a brand, but they represent around 40% of their revenue. Isn't that insane? 2% of people, 40% of revenue.
That is quite spectacular. I'm assuming that VIC means very important client.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Sometimes you see them at shows because they get invited to the shows as part of their, you know, I don't know, reward scheme, loyalty scheme. So it's always fun to see like who's actually buying these clothes because, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a really tricky time for the fashion industry and they need to sort of make sure that they're retaining loyalty and building their niche and their tribe and really, you know, building a whole world, you know, on the runway, but also beyond, like with the marketing, the storytelling, providing experiences. Like Xenia, for example, just did a ski trip in Italy after the Olympics. So it's not just about dresses and heels and clothes. It's a lot more than that.
I mean, is this something that is becoming nigh universal? The big fancy houses feeling that we have to do more than just sell people clothes. We have to sell people an entire lifestyle / vision.
Yeah, totally. And it's all about aspiration in a way that fashion has always been, but it's feeling extra crucial at the moment to be offering that.
And is it also maybe, and again, perhaps this relates to the struggles in the luxury sector of wanting people to feel like they're in a club now? And I guess if you have people feeling like in a club, they then feel like they have obligations to the club, i.e. to keep buying the club stuff.
I reckon it's really addictive. I wouldn't know. I'm not part of these clubs. I can't afford it. But I'm sure there is like an element of, yeah, like sort of dopamine hit of being part of a club that is super exclusive and no one else can go to. I mean, I feel like I get a tiny version of it just being able to be in the room at a show and, you know, that sort of confirmation when you get a ticket and it comes through and it's like, yes, you're in, you can come, you know, this is your seating assignment. It's like, oh, I made it to the Chanel show. I made it to Dior. So I can only imagine what it feels like to have an entire wardrobe by these people.
Well, just on that thought then, have you seen anything at any of these shows that may have tempted either you personally or you attempting to smuggle something onto the company credit card that made you want to sort of buy even further into this?
You keep accusing me, Andrew, of wanting to buy these super expensive clothes on the company card. Again, if finance is listening, I would never, ever do that. But one show I did leave feeling, oh, okay, I want to wear this was Carven. It was just so chic, very beautiful, like long floor length leather coats and like super interesting dresses. And it was just chic. I just want to feel like if I owned that wardrobe, I would be a better person for it.
Surely not. Grace Charlton in Paris, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. This is The Daily with me, Andrew Muller, and finally on today's show, our weekly reflection of what we've learned in the last 7 days. In this last 7 days, the hard way more than usual.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
We learned this week that a year and a bit or so is a long time in politics.
I will tell you, you're not going to have a war with me, and you're not going to have a third world war with me. That I can tell you.
Our interest, I think, very much is in not going to war with Iran.
The foolishness with which we ricocheted around the world, intervening, think it was in our best interest, when really we just overturned the table and created something worse in almost every single scenario.
We learned the same people who had quite recently assured anyone who asked that there was no even faintly imaginable way the United States would ever go to war with Iran specifically, or embark on campaigns of regime change generally, as this was something only a total idiot would even suggest, had instead decided on mature reflection that actually it was an absolutely dandy idea. How hard can it be? What could possibly go wrong?
I guess the worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen.
And we learned that whatever it took, operations would enjoy the complete and unwavering attention of the Commander-in-Chief.
Somebody said today, they said, oh, well, the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored.
Until, and we counted, literally 66 seconds later.
We're adding on to the building a little bit. We're improving the building. See that nice drape? I picked those drapes in my first term. I always like gold, but I think we can save a lot of money. I just saved curtains.
Operation Rolling Blinds, is that anything? Come on, like Operation Rolling Thunder. It's an extremely deft and learned allusion to the Vietnam War and a previous American air campaign which had effects other than those anticipated by its planners. Wasted on you people, honestly. Let us now have, for the first time in the history of this, the weekly What We Learned monologue on Monocle Radio, at least so far as we can recall, an authentic Kuwaiti military march. Actually, not bad. Got a bit of a swing to it. For we learned that at least one Kuwait Air Force FA-18 pilot was furiously riffling through the rules attending the designation of the title of Fighter Ace, i.e. can you count 3 towards your requisite 5 aerial kills if the aircraft you shot down were nominally on your side.
Now, the new video appears to show one of the 3 American fighter jets going down over Kuwait in what the U.S. military now calls a friendly fire incident during an Iranian attack.
Would be a bold move in these circumstances to paint the silhouettes on your nose cone. What say you, General Muttered Agreement crew?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
But we learned that, aside from the small matter of losing $300 million worth of air combat capability to one overly excitable Kuwaiti pilot, everything was going brilliantly.
This is very important, and we're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
And we learned something of the imperatives underpinning the American action in Iran, as we learned at the president's favorite timescale.
So we're building a lot of wall. We're building new sections starting in about 2 weeks. We're building some brand new sections, large sections. When am I going to put the extra $325 billion worth of tariffs? I will make that decision, I would say, over the next 2 weeks. Whether it's next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, doesn't make any difference. Whether it's now or in 3 weeks, doesn't make any difference. We're very advanced in testing. Other countries are calling us to find out what are we doing. And by the way, within 2 weeks, you'll see numbers and you'll see different forms of testing.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
Had very much been a factor.
If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. If we didn't do the B-2 attack.
Though we, for one humorous news monologue, could absolutely have sworn that circa last June,
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
So we learned that Iran had gone from complete and total obliteration to 2 weeks from launch in just 9 months, which is actually not unimpressive. Unless, of course, and remote though we can surely all agree this prospect is, Donald Trump, of all people, has simply no idea what he is doing or saying. For we learned, or at least were reminded, of the existential seriousness of the threat.
When crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen.
We'll be needing another bang on the awkward coughing and chairs scraping clip. But we learned that even in the United States' hour of desperate need, it had been unable to count on the assistance of its most trusted ally, the United Kingdom, due to it being overrun with windmills.
They got windmills all over the place that are ruining the country, ruining the landscapes, ruining the beautiful fields.
And Sharia courts.
In the UK, you have a terrible mayor of London, terrible, he's an incompetent guy. But you have Sharia courts adjudicating law.
We did obviously seek a ruling on whether we were even allowed broadcast this observation from the local mufti, but it turned out he was busy installing windmills. And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Tara Kangalu, Chris Sabatini, Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Grace Charlton. Today's show was produced by Chris Chermak and researched by Annalise Maynard. Our sound engineer was Mariella Bevan. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily returns at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening.